7:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Coming up at 8:05, Tucker Carlson joins us. And at 7:35, the bottom of this hour, Trevor Maddich on all things Super Bowl. I am Larry O'Connor, and this is Brian Wilson.
And right now, on our Newsmaker hotline, our good friend, our legal analyst, Joe DiGenova. How are you, Joe?
I'm just great, you guys.
Did you stay up late to watch the game last night?
I watched it in its entirety from here in Palm Springs, California. It was an absolute treat, and just very happy for the Ravens.
Oh, Palm Springs.
Palm Springs.
Springs.
Buffy, we're going to Palm Springs.
But thank you for waking up at 4 a.m. to talk to us.
That's good of you to do that.
Been listening to you from the very moment of the show.
Wow, that's truly impressive. All right, so look, a lot of things we want to talk about. I want to talk about Senator Menendez. We're going to give a more detailed update here in just a short while. But here's a guy that seems to have some legal problems. FBI apparently investigating. And now we hear that the Senate Ethics Committee is also beginning a preliminary investigation of this matter, which means that maybe in 10 or 12 years they will have some ruling on the matter. What's your thought, Joe?
Well, I think Senator Menendez is going to be one of the more embarrassing members of the United States Senate for some time to come. As you know, he is the incoming chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But
seems appropriate given what they're saying about it.
Yeah, he has his own foreign relations going on there in the Dominican.
He has a unique perspective on that issue. I must say this, though. I think that the criminal side of this is actually going to be much more difficult for him than the ethics side. I think the ethics case is actually going to go forward swiftly. But here's the problem for him. One of the things that his committee has jurisdiction over is the Trafficking in Women Act. And if it's true that some of the prostitutes were underage and some of the prostitutes were in the United States, not just the Dominican Republic, I think he's going to be in very, very serious trouble. I don't know if he'll be able to stay in the Senate. The Democrats are very concerned about whether or not they're going to be strong enough to keep control of the Senate in 2014. So I think the fact that he is under investigation now by the FBI is a very serious matter, and I think he's looking at a very bunch of really serious problems.
Well, we should let everyone know that coming up in the next hour at 8:05, Tucker Carlson will be here, and his publication, The Daily Caller, was actually the in the forefront of breaking this story. So we'll ask him if he has anything new on it. I'd like to ask you, on Friday, Joe DiGenova, the Obama administration through the Health and Human Services Department put out what they were calling, and what was characterized by the media, a compromise on the birth control health coverage. Of course, they suggested that they're offering a chance for religious nonprofit organizations to not have to pay for birth control or for abortions for their employees. Is that true? Is this in fact a compromise, or is this just another way of dressing up what these entities will end up having to do, which is pay for things that they find morally reprehensible?
I think it's window dressing. What it does is it does allow some of the nonprofit religious-affiliated institutions not to pay for contraception out of their coffers. But what they do have to do is make available a third-party administrator who can provide that coverage for the individuals who work for them, even though the religious-affiliated or nonprofit is not paying for it. What that means is that the American public will pay for that coverage, even though the religious-affiliated institution doesn't have to. So it's kind of a half and half compromise. But the problem is it doesn't cover for-profit businesses like Hobby Lobby, who do not want to provide this coverage. And so, in fact, it is not a compromise at all. It is just smoke and mirrors. You might even say it's like skeet shooting for photography.
But Joe DiGenova, really quickly, a follow-up on this. A lot of people have been saying that despite last year's ruling from the Supreme Court about the legality of the taxation and or the individual mandate on Obamacare, there are still a lot of legal fights ahead. Could this be one of those legal fights against Obamacare that could potentially reach the Supreme Court and actually bring down much of Obamacare?
Absolutely, Larry. This is an issue that will not go away. And the reason is they still have these requirements for religious institutions. It's going to be find its way into the Supreme Court sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. So the answer is it's a live issue, and the court will eventually have to hear it.
There's a Maryland case that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court. It's called Maryland versus King. It's one of those cases that deals with DNA evidence. What's this all about, and is it going to be sort of a real important case?
Yeah, this is going to be a trendsetter. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the 2009 case of a guy named Alonzo King, who was arrested for waving a shotgun in a threatening manner, which was a felony. So while he was arrested, they took a mouth swab and got a DNA test. They eventually matched it with a crime scene, a rape crime scene evidence, and he was subsequently convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for rape. The Maryland High Court threw out the conviction, saying that you could not take DNA without a warrant. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear this case. And the reason they did that is they're going to reverse the Maryland Supreme Court, and they're going to say that taking DNA swabs from people who are only arrested but not yet convicted is constitutional and does not require a search warrant. So this is a big case from out of Maryland, and it's going to be argued this year.
And that would give police officers an important new tool when they make an arrest.
Oh, it's incredible. And here's what happened. In another case, they actually took the swab from an arrestee for a serious offense, and then they discovered that he was guilty of a rape that another man had been convicted of. A father of a child had been convicted of raping his daughter, and they were able to show that the father was innocent. He was serving a prison sentence. So the benefits of this far outweigh any privacy interests that arrested individuals have.
Joe DiGenova, another story caught my eye. It's right here in the district. There's a former inmate who was suing the district because he's deaf. He was in jail for 60 days for assault, and he's suing under the Americans with Disabilities Act because the district did not provide him with an interpreter while he was in jail. Now, you were a former U.S. attorney here in Washington. Is that how you see the Americans with Disabilities Act properly interpreted?
Well, I think the Americans with Disabilities Act has metastasized into an all-purpose problem solver for everything in the world, and I'm really quite afraid that he may very well have a case. And the reason for that is the Americans with Disability Act has very few limitations in it. It has been read very, very broadly by the courts, including the Supreme Court. And the truth is, if you're going to incarcerate somebody like this, the Americans with Disability Act does provide that one of the things you have to do is make them able to function. And believe me, you and I both know that running a jail is not an easy thing. It's very, very difficult. It requires all kinds of security. I have no idea how you would implement something like this. And it may just be that individuals who are deaf and who cannot otherwise communicate and need a sign language person, they just have to be separated from the population, kept somewhere else, but certainly not within the institution. I don't know how you would absolutely ever do this unless you had a sign language literate prison official who would serve this function.
All right, Joe DiGenova.
Appreciate it, Joe. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, keep it on the fairways, Joe.
I'm signing off from out in Palm Springs.
You could hear the wind in the palm fronds rustling in the background.
It is good to be Joe DiGenova. Palm Springs, St. Michael's. He's just a man.
It is.